for joining this meeting and joining in on time, I must add. This is the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit Training of Trainers workshop. It's quite a mouthful, but this important workshop is being organized by the USAID Southern Africa Trade Hub, Trade and Investment Hub, in partnership with ZAM, the Zambia Association of Manufacturers. So I'll be moderating this training today, and my name is Sopani Muzumara. I'm the Membership and Business Development Specialist at ZAM. So the meeting is starting at 9. So right now we'll just go into a quick round of introductions because we'll be spending the whole day together. So it's good that we get to know each other. So I'll just be mentioning names as they appear on the list of participants, and then can give a quick introduction, your name and the organization you're coming from. So I'll start with Asha Chakotamo. Okay, we'll skip that one. Go to Brian Sofu. Just give your name and the organization you're coming from. Okay, the two names that are following each other say they are on hold. I'll just skip those ones and go to Mr. Gregory Chansa.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gregory Chansa, and I'm an agribusiness specialist at the USAID Trade Hub. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to Jeanette Nanyangwe.
Thank you, Sopani. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeanette Nanyangwe, Country Program Assistant for USAID Trade Hub Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you, Kawama Banda. Kawama, if you're speaking, your mic is on mute. Okay, we'll quickly go to the next one. Mary Gonda, I hope I pronounced that right.
Good morning and thank you. My name is Mary Ganda and I'm an independent consultant working with the USA Trade Hub on the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. Thank you.
Thank you. Moses Mfuni. Okay, we'll go to Mukamba Grace. Just a quick introduction of your name and the institution you're coming from.
Good morning. My name is Grace Mukamba. I'm coming from the Zambia Association of Manufacturers, Policy Analyst, Legal Intern. Thank you.
Thank you. Miles Malambo.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Miles Malambo. I'm coming from Zambia Association of Manufacturers. I'm the Finance and Admin Specialist.
Thank you. Mr. Peter Manda.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Manda. I'm the country representative for Zambia at the USAID Trade and Investment Hub. Thank you.
Thank you. Rose D. Mwanza. Ms. Rose D. Mwanza. So we'll quickly go to the last one. It's Wendy. I hope I get that right, but I'll just say it's Wendy.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Wendy Ngobo, and I am a communications specialist at the US Trade and Investment Hub.
Thank you so much. Okay, so this training of trainers workshop is a trade promotion service provider focused training, and it will provide clear understanding of information in the cross-border trade toolkit. And the aim of this workshop is to ensure that partner organizations such as ZAM, who are promoting trade, are trained on the fundamental skills of exporting goods to South Africa. And the purpose of this is so that they train them, and then we later on pass on the information to would-be exporters. But in this case, we have involved the would-be exporters so that they get the right training. So without wasting much time, I'll call upon Mr. Peter Manda, who is the country representative for the USAID Trade Hub. So Mr. Peter Manda, he's an agribusiness professional and program manager, and he has over 10 years of experience contributing to the value chain expertise and development programs in Zambia. And he also has vast experience, 25 years experience with agribusiness production and marketing. So he has clearly proven experience performing market analysis, developing value chains, creating business linkages, producing business plans, and trade facilitation. And he has performed numerous market studies and provided recommendations for interventions to support enabling business environments and creating productive value chains for Zambian producers. So, Mr. Peter Manda, I'll just call you up to give your opening remarks.
Like Sopana said, the intention is really that we have a core team in Zambia that are experienced in terms of facilitating cross-border trade. As we all know now, the new government's focus is basically trade and investments. And so in terms of trade, we can trade internally, but also we can trade cross-border, so meaning export trade. And so ZAM being our partner, we want to make sure that we have enough expertise within the ZAM in terms of what are the simple steps that a firm requires to know if they have to get involved in export trade. Along with the ZAM, we also want to make sure some of the private sector firms themselves, they participate in this so that they can hear firsthand from our consultant, Mary, who is a regional expert in terms of what is required to participate in export trade. And so for Zambia, we are excited. As we all know, we are a land-linked country, meaning that for us, export trade or trading across borders should be as natural as possible. And so with this workshop, we are happy that the USAID is giving us support to make sure that we can internalize that expertise within Zambia so that next time we don't have to rely so much on Mary. We should have that expertise within the country. At the end of the day, what we want to achieve is that knowledge is well embedded within ZAM, but also within select few traders themselves, so that together we have a core nucleus of expertise, and then we can replicate this by training others, not necessarily through a formal training like this one, but maybe a phone message or a WhatsApp message, an email message to any other firm that intends to export. So we are expecting a ripple effect after this training so that as a team in Zambia, we are ready to trade with our neighboring countries. So thanks so much for making this time. Let's use this time very wisely. Let's make sure that we learn as much as possible from Mary, who is a guru on trade, and let's ask as many questions as possible so that at the end of the day, we are the experts that can help our friends within Zambia to trade across borders. So thank you so much for your time, and I wish everyone a successful workshop today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Manda, for those welcoming remarks. And indeed, we need to learn as much as possible so that it gets easy for institutions like ZAM to spread out the information. So you'll be able to spread out information to people that we can't reach. So right now, I'll call upon the Zambia Association of Manufacturers CEO, Ms. Florence Mulea, to give her welcoming remarks. So Ms. Florence Mulea is a trade expert as well. She's got a master's in trade policy and trade law, and she has extensive work experience, over 10 years work experience in research and policy advocacy and analysis. And she is currently providing overall oversight to a portfolio of over 350 members, and these are in the manufacturing sector. She has also previously worked at the Zambia Institute of Policy Analysis and Research, ZIPA, as well as the ZRA, Zambia Revenue Authority. So Ms. Florence Mulea, I'll just call you on to give the welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Safani, and good morning to everyone who's on the call. I'd like to thank you very much for joining in. We have come a long way, and it's now good to see the developments that have happened in the manufacturing sector rise to a higher level. So the importance of having such a training is to ensure that we move from being mainly importers. So most of us know exactly what to do as we are bringing in our goods, as we are importing our raw materials, and so on and so forth. But in terms of exports, it's something that we all have to grapple with. And so it's important for us to understand and then also be able to pass on the knowledge to other would-be users of such a toolkit. So I'd like to thank the USAID for this partnership. It's always appreciated working together. And I'd also like to thank Madam Mary for agreeing to undertake the training for all of us. I wish us fruitful deliberations as we go into this training, and I wish all of us to take advantage of this opportunity and just make sure that we learn as much as possible, not only for our benefit, but also at the end of the day to be able to share the information with other would-be exporters. So thank you very much once again, and have a pleasant training.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mulea. So right now, I would like to ask the participants who were not able to introduce themselves, if they can quickly type in the chat box your name and the institution that you're coming from. I hope that everyone is able to hear me. We have some participants whose mics are on hold, but if you can hear me and you haven't introduced yourself, please type in your name and the company that you're coming from in the chat box. So right now, before we actually start the training, we would like to get a prayer from Ms. Kawamabanda.
Okay, good morning to everybody. Let us pray. Our God above in heaven, we come before you right now in the mighty name of Jesus. We just want to thank you for this opportunity to gain knowledge. We pray that you may start with us and end with us. It is in the blessed name of Jesus Christ we pray. We thank you in our hearts. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Kawama, for that prayer. Okay, so looking at time, we're very good on time. I'll just give a few housekeeping rules as we continue with the meeting. This is a full day meeting. It will be ending at 15:30. So you can imagine we have quite some time together. So firstly, I'll run through the program with where we are right now. So I'm giving a few housekeeping rules. And then the next session will be an introduction to the regional cross-border trade toolkit and video series, which will be done by Madam Mary. And then we'll then go on a short coffee break just to refresh our minds. And then later on, we'll go into another session by Madam Mary. And this is the country and product specific processes, selecting payment methods and intercoms, as well as creating a timeline for the export order. So she will just go straight into all that is needed for exporting. Then we'll then break into groups. We have an assessment because this is a training. We'd like to see how much has been gotten from this training. So we'll go into breakaway rooms and there'll be an assignment that will be provided. And then we'll come back to the main room for a discussion. Then we'll break out for lunch at 13 to 14 hours. And then we'll come back again, have presentations from the different groups that the different discussions that you had in the groups. And the last session, which will be around 14:45 to around 15:20, will be a brief on tracking usage of the regional cross-border trade toolkit and discussion. So then after this, the session will be closed with an evaluation. And I'd like to note that certificates will be given after this training. So this is why we have these evaluations, as well as the assignments and discussions. So I'd like this to be very interactive so that we see how much has been gotten from this session as we go on to train others or share this information to potential exporters. So a few housekeeping rules. If you are joined in on your computer or your laptop, you would either have joined in on your website or using the web browser or the Microsoft Teams application. So just a quick one, there's a video icon. So this one, if you'd like to speak and turn on your camera, you will then click on this icon. There's a microphone icon and you can click it to mute or unmute. I'd like to advise that if you're not speaking or if you're not on the floor to speak or not asking a question, kindly keep this microphone icon muted so that we can go on with the flow without any interruptions. Then if you will be sharing either a presentation on what has been discussed in the group discussion, you would then open the next icon near the microphone, and this is the share tray. Then we have the three buttons next to the share icon. So if you're using a computer and you like to make your screen bigger to see either the presentation or the presenter, or you'd like to see everyone who's in the meeting, you can click here and it will give you a number of options of how you would like to join the meeting or see the meeting. And then to your right of this is the raise hand option. So you click this one if you have a question as the presentation is going on, and the presenter will be able to point at you to speak, or will take note of your hand and then you'll be asked to ask your question later on. The next icon after the raise hand is for conversation. So if you would like to either write your name, like I mentioned earlier, for introductions, or you have a burning question but the presentation is still going on, you can quickly ask using this chat icon. So you can quickly put your name, put whatever it is that you would like to ask using that icon. And then the next one is a participant icon. So if you'd like to see who's in the meeting or you'd like to chat directly with them, once you click this, a panel will be open on your right, and you'll be able to see who's in the meeting as well as chat with them or get contacts depending on how the conversation is going. So these are the few housekeeping rules that we have. For anything, please reach out. You can raise your hand if either you can't hear the panelist or the presenter, or there's something going on with the meeting, either with the audio. But otherwise, we'll go straight into the next presentation. I have seen some people joining just now, so just repeat the what I mentioned about introductions. If you're not able to introduce yourself at the start of the meeting, kindly type in your name and the institution where you're coming from. Okay, so for the next part of this program, which is the first session, we'll have Ms. Mary Gaunda, who's a logistics and trade consultant. So Ms. Gaunda has over 18 years of work experience, and her previous roles include sales, key client management, and human resource within the AP Moller-Maersk Group. And she has and her other roles include National Customer Service Manager at CMA CGM Group, which is a logistics group, I assume. And she's been a lecturer in maritime studies at the Durban University of Technology. She's also a member of the Institute of Directors, Trade Experts, and a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers. She holds a Master's of Commerce degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal and PQE from the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers. So as you have seen, she has quite an extensive experience. In her current role as an independent consultant, Ms. Mary works with development agencies and companies to provide logistics, trade facilitation, and value chain solutions, which is what she will be doing in this training. So right now, I will welcome Ms. Mary Gaunda to start with the next presentation.
Good morning to our participants and to my colleagues in the USA Trade Hub. I'd like to thank Mr. Peter Bandatu for doing the introduction. Madam Florence, it's good to have someone who's actually so experienced in trade joining us and being part of this. As well as our Madam Kawami for the prayer and Madam Sapani for being a really good moderator. And, you know, it's very important for people to understand the rules, but I think if you have any questions, as Madam Sapani has said, please put them in the chat and we will have time later on for discussions on on the topics that we've covered, or if there's any other questions that you may have related to trade or related to exports that you're dealing with. I will now share my screen with my PowerPoint. Okay. So once again, welcome to the USA Southern Africa Trade Investment Hub Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit Training of Trainers Workshop. The aim of these workshops is to train our partners and to ensure as many people as possible understand the content of the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. We have worked really hard on bringing together the toolkit, putting together the document and looking at ways that we can simplify trade. We've surveyed different organizations within each of the countries that are exporting to South Africa. We've looked at specific commodities, and this is how we actually came up with the toolkit. So we've listened to the issues and the challenges that people have faced when trying to trade and when trying to export to South Africa. So I hope this session will really be helpful to your business, and it will be information that you would share with others. Okay, my agenda for today is we will be going through the introduction to the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit video series. We'll have a Q&A session most likely before our tea break, since we may have a few minutes available at that point. When we come back from the tea and coffee break, we will go into the actual content of the presentation and the training, first being country and product specific processes. We'll then move on to selecting payment methods and Incoterms, creating a timeline for the export order, and we will finish off with a brief on the assignment and a discussion So please, as I've said earlier, if you've got any questions at any point, please put them in the chat box, and then we can actually have an interactive discussion. The whole point of this is so that you learn as much as possible, and you can use that information for your own businesses or pass it on to other people. You should all have a copy of the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit with you. And there will be some pages where you may need to follow online or, while I'm speaking. So please use it. Okay, the introduction to the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit video series. The USA Trade Hub has worked on creating a series of videos to highlight how the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit can be used to increase exports from Zambia to South Africa. The first video is on the introduction to the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. It will highlight the different types of information you can find on the toolkit, and things like the Incoterms, the payment methods, just to give you an idea of what to expect from the toolkit. So I will share that first video. Apologies, just give me a second, please. Sorry. Wendy, I'm not sure if you can actually assist with sharing the video. I'm not sure why it's not pulling up to share on my screen.
Okay, I'll share it just now.
Thank you. Okay, my apologies for the delay. I didn't expect this because I'm normally sharing the videos. So just give us a few minutes. In the meantime, I will go through what the video covers. So Wendy, you can just interrupt me when you're ready to show the videos. Okay, so going back to the introduction to the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit, we spent a lot of time working on the different commodities and looking at ways that we can actually simplify the processes. What we did find was that a lot of people who were exporting had problems with their documentation. They had problems when it goes across the border. And not expecting some of the duties that they needed to pay, or not expecting the fact that they needed to pay VAT, because we are all part of the SADC region, and automatically we assume, okay, we are not, we do not need to pay customs duties. So what we needed to actually do was look at what were the problems, and one of the main problems was looking at the documentation that people were submitting, and what okay, Wendy, I think you are almost ready there. So documentation was one of the issues, so I'll leave Wendy to start the video now, and yeah, we'll continue this after this video. Sorry, Wendy, there is no sound.
The African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA for short, is the United States legislation that enhances market access to the U.S. for eligible African countries. How is this done? By allowing duty-free imports into the United States for thousands of different products that originate in sub-Saharan Africa. Export must be eligible. In Southern Africa, this includes Angola, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, the DRC, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, and Zambia. Secondly, the product must be eligible. There are more than 6,400 products that qualify under AGOA for duty-free access. Product eligibility can be found in the Harmonized Tariff Schedule, which is accessible on the internet. Thirdly, the product must be imported directly from the country of origin, or if it is shipped via another country, it cannot enter that country's commercial space. And lastly, the product must meet the requirements of origin rules. The origin rules acknowledge that a product originating in one country may include parts or materials that also come from other countries. In these cases, there are certain criteria that apply. For example, at least 35% of the parts, materials, or ingredients must come from the country of origin. If your product satisfies these 4 requirements, you can take advantage of AGOA's duty-free benefits.
Because we are producing a product from scratch, in Eswatini from start to finish, we are eligible for AGOA. You have to prove that you're actually manufacturing the goods here. You can't be importing and re-exporting. You have to add value to the product.
Now that I know about the USA Trade and Investment Hub, finding the information that I require to export, it's so easy.
Find out more about AGOA in the AGOA Export User Manual or by contacting the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. Expanding your horizons could help grow your business and the economy of your community, country, and continent.
Okay, apologies to the participants. I think this morning has just given us quite a few technical issues. So that was actually not the correct video. We will show the correct video shortly. I will give Wendy some time to just set up the first video. Really apologies again. So Wendy's just getting the first video. Yeah, ready again.
The African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA for short, is the United States legislation that enhances market access to the U.S.
Okay, so while Wendy gets the videos ready, I'm just going to continue with an introduction to all the videos, and then we will just play them one after the other because we are losing on time at the moment. Okay, so the second video is on the export process. And when you're looking at the export process, it's not just you know, getting your first order and starting to export. The export process starts way before you even get your first order. And it's about getting your business ready. So if looking at your business readiness, and you'll find more information on the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit on business readiness. It's about looking at the finances within your company, looking at the managerial skills, the technical skills, finding out how to market to the export market, and looking at your target countries. So if you are exporting to South Africa, you really need to look at who your competitors are, because your competitors could be locally within Zambia, or it could be one of the neighboring countries like Malawi, like Botswana, who are also exporting, the same sort of commodities that you are exporting. And maybe they may have better quality, or they may offer a better price. So the main part about getting your business ready is about understanding and moving, understanding the international market, but also moving away from the domestic market. So you'll find that what's acceptable in your domestic market may not actually be acceptable in the South African market, because our quality standards may be different and our quality requirements may be different, or even the packaging may be different that we require. So getting your business ready for exports, you need a lot of funds, because you need to be able to spend money on attending trade shows, networking, looking at how you can actually find the buyers in the market. So this takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy, and you need people in your organization, if not you, to actually start looking at that. So that export process starts, sometimes 18 months before you actually start your first or you get your first export order. The other part is looking at your product readiness. Is your product ready for the export market? Do you have the right quality? Can your factories actually manufacture the correct quantities? Can you upscale quickly to actually meet the export demand? The third video is on contracts and payment methods. So here we look at, how do you start a contract when looking at export? So it's not a sort of normal contract where you have a written out contract and you can actually say, okay, this is what we're offering you, and here we will both sign this contract. When you're looking at international shipments, and those of you who are involved in trade already will know that there is no specific contract that is written out. You are normally discussing with your buyers what are the requirements, what do they actually require when you are providing them a quote, the quantities, the color, the different quality that you can offer them. And obviously those things will come at different prices. So you'll be going back and forth and discussing things like who is responsible for the transport, who needs to pay for insurance, because it is a bit of a distance coming overland from Zambia to South Africa. You're going to go through a couple of borders. So with that, you do have quite a bit of risk, right? So you will need to have those discussions of when risk passes. So that's where your Incoterms comes in. And then looking at your payment methods, we have 4 payment methods. The first is cash in advance. Then you've got your letter of credit, bank collection, and open account. So your cash in advance is where the buyer pays in advance, either the full amount or they pay a deposit and then they pay the rest of the funds when they've either received the goods or the documents. The letter of credit is where you have the banks involved, and so they will receive the documents and they will make payment on behalf of the buyer. So this is with the letters of credit, we will go into detail on how it works, and it is a little more costly than other payment methods, but it is currently the most secure payment method. Your bank collections is similar to the letter of credit, but it's cheaper, but you have a lot more risk because when you look at the letter of credit, the letter of credit is governed by the UCP 600, which is an international standard. So banks have to follow a specific process when they're dealing with a letter of credit. When it comes to documentary credits, the rules are not as strict, and they're not actually, checking your documents on your behalf. It's sort of like acting like a post office, really. But it is more secure than actually dealing with the buyer yourself. And then you've got the open account, and this is where you send the goods to the buyer, and they will pay on invoice, or they will pay once they either receive the documents or the goods. So we will be going into detail in all the different aspects of your contracts, your payment methods. And the last video is on Incoterms. What we have found is that, when you are learning Incoterms, it is quite confusing. And as a business owner, logistics and trade may not be your specialty, of course, because your specialty is on the product that you're manufacturing or processing and exporting. So you actually want to focus on the product. So what we've looked at is how can we make you understand Incoterms in the easiest possible way. So if you go into the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit, you'll find that we actually have a two-way one. If you go onto that, you'll see once you've selected which Incoterm you have, we've explained very, very clearly what you as a seller or an exporter needs to do. and what the buyer needs to do. So if you've chosen X Works, the buyer will need to come and pick up the goods from your premises, which gives you very little risk. So all you'd have to do is get the goods ready and make sure that it's packaged and ready to be loaded onto a truck. If you've chosen FOB or FCA, FCA is where you deliver it to the first carrier, which could be a logistics company or a transport company. Once you've delivered it there, maybe to their warehouse, then your risk passes at that point. So whatever risk passes, up until that point, you will need to get insurance, you'll need to pay costs and so on. So there's different points where your risk and cost pass, and also what you need to do as an exporter. So you may have specific tasks. So you may need to book the cargo with a logistics company, or you may have to book the transport and pay for the transport. And remember, when you're choosing Incoterms, you need to look at your finances. You need to look at how much of risk that you are willing to carry and what actually works for you. Because if you are new to exports, you need to make a decision that works for you, because you do not want to have all of that risk and you do not want to pay all of those costs. If firstly, you don't have the money available, or if you do not have the insurance, or you don't know where to get all of this done. But the Incoterms are chosen between the seller and the buyer. Nobody else is involved in the Incoterms and how it is run. This is not about the logistics companies. It's not about the shipping companies. It's not about customs. It's between you, the seller, and the buyer. What works for you? Wendy, please let me know if you're ready with the videos, and then maybe we can start those quickly.
In Southern Africa, the most populous country by far is South Africa. This may benefit you if you own a business in Angola, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, or Zambia, because exporting your products to South Africa gives you access to a much bigger potential market than your country. Additionally, these countries belong to the Southern African Development Community, which allows member countries to trade with reduced and exempted customs duties. This lowers trade costs and increases the competitiveness of your products compared to non-member countries. Beyond the potential to grow your own business, cross-border trade also contributes to economic development and ultimately helps to alleviate poverty in the region.
Exporting to South Africa, it's been very, very positive. For us as a small country to export there, it's huge.
They are the biggest consumers within our region.
By exporting to South Africa, being our closest trading partner has really helped us grow the company. We would not have been able to do as well as we have done. South Africa was the only market really for our product.
The more produce we sell and the more markets the US Trade Hub exposes us to, the more people we can actually develop.
The kind of commodities you might export to South Africa range from metals, minerals, and machinery to foods and fabrics. Examples include meat and meat products, fish, medicinal plants and natural products, nuts, seeds and beans, moringa, honey, fruits, soya products, sauces, tea and coffee, textiles and clothing, personal protective equipment, handcrafts and accessories. It is important to note that some products have specific requirements regarding applicable taxes, certifications, permits, inspections, packaging, and grading. Additionally, your business needs to understand the processes, procedures, and implications involved. Is there a market for your product? Does your business have the skills and resources to export? What are the requirements and risks? What documents and certifications are needed? These considerations all need to be addressed and prepared for as early as possible to reduce costly mistakes and delays. The USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub has developed a regional cross-border trade toolkit specifically to answer your questions and to help you get export ready. This video series summarizes some of the most relevant aspects of the toolkit, and we're here to help you. Find out more about exporting to South Africa in the toolkit or by contacting the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. The process of exporting from Southern African countries to South Africa begins long before the physical movement of goods. The first thing you need to do is to assess how ready you are to export. In terms of your business, you should consider aspects like: are you committed to building an export business and adapting your operations? Do you have the management skills and technical expertise in your business to undertake research and development and to execute all the administrative processes? Do you have the financial resources required to fund expansion into the international market and the capacity required to produce and manufacture goods to meet demand? In terms of your products, you need to assess if there's a demand for them in South Africa. What is the competition within the market? Will it be easy to find buyers? Are your products and packaging adaptable for the South African market if necessary?
A lot of research was done before venturing into South Africa. In every single business, you have competitors. We did research and found that there is a space for our products in South Africa.
So we did our research and identify that there is a niche of baby vegetable production. So that is where we see the niche that we need to cover here so that we are able to compete in South Africa.
Remember that you don't need to tick all the boxes to start exporting. Begin the process by registering as an exporter with the relevant local authorities, such as the Chamber of Commerce or Department of Trade. Some products require registrations with other government departments, like the Ministry of Agriculture. And you will need a certificate of origin to benefit from the exemption of customs duties. Within the Southern African Development Community, at this point, it is advisable to speak to a freight forwarding agent who will process customs clearance at the border. The agent will be able to discuss transport costs, which you'll need for the next stage of the process, quoting. When a potential buyer in South Africa requests a quote, you may need to include costs like transport and insurance, in addition to the product costs, depending on the agreement. These costs, along with other important details, are usually supplied on a pro forma invoice. Once the buyer accepts the quote, you will then need to establish a contract with the terms and conditions of the sale, covering payment method, delivery, and insurance. To learn about this in more detail, watch our video titled Contracts and Payments. When the conditions have been accepted by the buyer, you may start processing the order. This includes packaging your products and getting them ready for transport, as well as working with your freight forwarder to arrange transport and customs clearance. As much as this stage is about physically shipping products, a priority should be completing the relevant documents correctly and comprehensively. These documents, which include invoices, packing lists, transportation documents, and certificates of origin, are discussed in more detail in the Cross-Border Trade Toolkit, which also covers other aspects of exporting to South Africa.
The cross-border toolkit, we've used it. We're checking and cross-checking what do we have, where can we improve, what are the conditions, what are the certification that we need to meet. So we're gradually improving ourselves so that we're able to do some cross-border export.
Using the US Trade and Investment Hub covers a lot of these requirements, and they actually guide you and walk you through contracts.
The export process may seem detailed and daunting, but you don't necessarily need to be a large-scale business to export. If you're ready and willing, help is available. For information or guidance, contact the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. To start the contract process, you send a quote to the buyer. If the buyer is happy with the terms and price, they will accept your quote. Congratulations! You're a giant step closer to becoming an exporter. But before you celebrate, remember that there are risks and responsibilities for you and your buyer. So it is in both of your interests to make sure you have a contract that is clear and comprehensive. In international trade, the contract is seldom one single document. It is the negotiation that usually happens by email between the buyer and the seller. A good contract will stipulate the details, terms and conditions of the sale, protecting both parties, helping to avoid risks like non-delivery or non-payment, and make the responsibilities of the buyer and supplier explicit. Broadly, your obligations as the seller are to deliver the goods, hand over all relevant documents, and transfer ownership of the goods. The goods must conform to the description, quality, and quantity you committed to, and must be packaged in a way that preserves and protects the contents. The buyer's obligations are to comply with the agreed formalities, pay for the goods, and take delivery. The contract must specify where and when delivery will take place, where risk passes, and who is responsible for which costs. The International Chamber of Commerce, Incoterms, provides a simple way to state these requirements. To learn about this in more detail, watch our video titled Incoterms. One of the most important components of the contract is your and the buyer's agreement on how and when you will be paid. There are various methods of payment. Cash in advance is the most secure for the exporter, as you are paid in part or in full before delivering the goods. However, this method is used infrequently, as it places the financial burden and risk on the buyer. A letter of credit is a bank's written undertaking to make payment once the required documents are submitted. Letters of credit involve many different parties and are more expensive than most other payment methods, but they provide security for both the seller and the buyer. A cheaper but less secure option is a bank collection. This is where through your bank you can send a document to the buyer initiating the collection of money owed to you. Although this is legally binding, it does not give you as much protection as a letter of credit. Lastly, you can sell on an open account basis, whereby you send shipping documents directly to your buyer, who should then pay you. This carries a risk of non-payment and is usually used by big established sellers and buyers. It's not recommended for new exporters, and if you do use this option, export credit insurance is advisable. So, your products have been shipped, risk has passed to the buyer, everyone has fulfilled their obligations, and you've been paid. Now you can celebrate. For more details, information and guidance, you can consult the Cross-Border Trade Toolkit or contact the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. Exporting your products to South Africa can be great for your business and your community. Of course, there are significantly more responsibilities and risks that you take on as an exporter compared to trading locally.
The risk and responsibilities when exporting, I think the greatest one is insurance. You need to make sure that you insure your goods because anything can happen.
The contractual agreements are so important. Payment terms are so important, and ensuring that you maintain quality from farm to the final client.
For this reason, the agreement or contract between the supplier and buyer is a crucial part of doing business. It should clearly and explicitly specify what each of you is responsible for, where those responsibilities start and end, and indicate what can happen if one of you does not fulfill your obligations. Fortunately, this part of your contract does not need to be created or written from scratch, as an established and globally accepted set of agreements already exist. Incoterms, or International Commercial Terms. Incoterms are published by the International Chamber of Commerce, or ICC for short. They've been used since 1936 and are updated every 10 years. The most recent update in 2020 has 11 different Incoterms, with different options applicable to different modes of transporting the goods. 7 of the options are appropriate for any mode of transport, and 4 are only applicable for sea and inland waterway transport. You can access more details on the ICC website and even download a wall chart which summarizes the 11 options. The USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub has also developed an easy-to-use summary tool to help you and the buyer choose the correct Incoterms for your order, with the most appropriate terms regarding delivery, costs, and risks. Once you decide on a specific Incoterm, you will be clear about your responsibilities regarding transport, the insurance cover you need to procure, where the goods must be delivered, which documents you must provide, and who is responsible for processing customs clearance. Buyers and sellers need to understand what they're responsible for during each transaction, and Incoterms provide an easy way to reduce the potential for legal complications, provided that each party understands their roles and obligations. In short, Incoterms help you and the buyer to minimize or avoid uncertainty and risks.
So the importance of a contract is to ensure that you, as the manufacturer and exporter, is safeguarded against anything that can go wrong.
As well as dealing with the clients, you need to ensure that you are contracted, we are sure of the payment terms, we are sure that they will not say your stock is not in good condition, whereas when it left here, it was in good condition. So the contractual agreement are so important.
The summary of the Incoterms, as well as help and guidance about other aspects of exporting, are provided in the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. You can also contact the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub. In Southern Africa, the most
Thank you, Wendy. And we do apologize again for the technical issues earlier. Are there any questions from any of the participants? I don't see anything on the chat. So I will hand over to Madam Sapani for the coffee break.
Thank you so much, Madam Mary. These videos have been very easy to watch and very informative. So I hope that the participants have gotten a few things. I've been writing down things on a piece of paper. But thank you so much. So we are done with the first session and we'll be going on a 20 minutes coffee break. We are right on time. So this is good as we progress. So we'll be going on a coffee break and the meeting will be left open. So at exactly 11:20, we'll be back and going to the next question. So if you have any questions or anything that may have come up, we can write it in the chat box and then we'll continue and answer the question or the clarification as we come back from the tea break. So we'll be going on the break now. Just to add on, the weather is really good. If you're in Osaka, the weather is really good for tea or coffee. So to refresh your mind, you can actually make a cup of coffee or tea if you're in your office or if you're working from home.
Thank you. Bye.
Good morning once again. Welcome back. I hope you had your teas or coffee or some water. With this weather, it's normal for you not to drink your required water, but I hope you had some liquids during the tea and coffee break. So we'll go straight into the next session. And for those that have just joined in, our first session before the tea break was basically an introduction that laid a foundation for what will be discussed. We went through some very interesting videos, and this was 4 videos, if I'm not mistaken, and they talked about basically exporting through the AGOA, things like exporting directly to either South Africa or the USA, requirements and the rules of origin, that 35% of your inputs should come from a specific country that is on the list of countries in the AGOA. Looked at contracts, Incoterms, different payment methods, either bank collection, cash in advance, letters of credit or open accounts, and also the few risks that are associated with each payment methods. So to continue this session, I'll ask Madam Mary to just come back and go into details, and she will be in her next presentation, she'll be looking at country and product specific processes. She'll be looking at selecting payment methods and Incoterms, and she'll be going in detail of the different risks that are associated with these. And she'll also talk about creating a timeline for the export order. So, Madam Mary, over to you.
Thank you very much. I will go through the different topics now, and I will share my screen. So I will keep my video off. But as I've said earlier, please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat and we will address them a little later. But just keep them coming, and keep your notes so we can actually have a discussion once we are done with the content itself. When we started this project and started looking at the processes for exporting from countries like Zambia to South Africa, we had a specific list of products that we had to look at. And these were products that USA Trade Hub had discussed with our partners, which was brought up in previous meetings, where people had decided, okay, this is the type of product I'm exporting. These are the issues I've been facing. So we've looked at these specific products that's on the list here. So looking at from groundnuts to meat and fish, coffee, handicrafts and accessories, and looking at what is the process. So we've looked at all the different countries. We look at the process that they followed. So to develop the regional cross-border trade toolkit, we tried not to put too much of information and tried to make sure that the information that was sort of applicable to Zambia and applicable to Malawi and Botswana and all the other countries, we looked at what the similar information that people were looking at. And that's how we started looking at the regional cross-border trade toolkit. And one of the main issues was getting goods into South Africa and them having been stopped by customs or by any other authority. So we looked at what happens when the goods get stopped. How can we avoid goods getting stopped as well? And that went back to getting the right documentation right at the beginning. So looking at getting your import permits. So when you are exporting to South Africa, especially when it comes to agricultural products, we do need import permits for a lot of the products that we import. And these import permits, when you're looking at agricultural products, we need to get them from the Department of Agriculture. So if I import from you and I'm importing honey or macadamia nuts or coffee or tea, I need to contact the Department of Agriculture here in South Africa and complete the application form where I will give them the details of the seller. I'll give them my details and I will give them the details of the goods that I'm looking to import and the quantity. So they will decide whether or not they're approving that permit. But if I actually go ahead and import goods without a permit, then it will definitely be stopped because customs has triggers on their system. So as soon as they see specific products where we need import permits and that there is no import permit included in the documents that we submit to customs, they will immediately put a stop to those goods, right? And then we will get the Department of Agriculture involved, and there are huge delays when it comes to this, and additional costs and fines. So we looked at how can we actually avoid getting your goods stopped. And one of the main things is dealing with your buyer and making sure that they have an import permit. And from your side, making sure that you have a phytosanitary certificate, especially for the agricultural products. And different products, you know, you get different permits from different organizations, but we need to be aware of it as early as possible. Now, if there's a product that you export that's not on this list and you need advice on it, please contact your local USA Trade Hub office and speak to Jeanette or Peter. And you know, if there's advice that you need, they can always contact me and I can assist with that. So if it's not on the list, please let us know and we would be happy to help you with that. So moving on to the actual products and what you need to look at. This you will find, I think it's on page 36 of the toolkit. Yeah. So the commodities and the information that's on the screen here and that I'll be sharing now is on page 36 of the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. So this is information that you will have at your fingertips. So if you want to export groundnuts, you just go onto page 36 and you can start going through all the different requirements for the different products that we've looked at. Now, remember, we've looked at the SADC trade agreement for this, right? So under the SADC agreement, if you are exporting within the SADC region, you do not pay customs duties, right? So you are exempt from custom duties if the goods are sourced and manufactured within the region. So if you are coming from Zambia with a product from Zambia that's been grown in Zambia, it's been processed in Zambia, then if you are exporting it to South Africa, then you do not incur customs duties. But you may still have to pay VAT, okay? And we in South Africa, we will need to pay VAT as well, okay? So, and you know, normally with exports, depending on the country, you may get your VAT rebate from your customs department or your revenue department, okay? So VAT is calculated at 15% of the FOB value plus duties. So duties here will be 0 plus excise. Now, excise is another type of duty. So excise duties is for luxury goods. So that could be things like if you are manufacturing something like sunscreen, which is deemed according to customs as luxury goods, so that you may have to pay 7% or 9% of the FOB value, right? And then you've got your fuel tax, which is your local fuel tax, plus 10% of your FOB value. So you are calculating 15% of all of these different values, and that is how that is calculated, okay? So just keep that in mind because this is part of the assignment. So if you've got $20,000, which is the example I've given you in the assignment, Your duty is zero, your excise is zero, then you'll have to look at your fuel tax if you know what it is. If you don't, when calculating, don't worry about it. And 10% of your FOB value, right? So it'll be 15% times 20,000 plus the 10% of FOB value plus 2,000. So it'll be 15% of 22,000. That's how you'll be calculating your VAT. And it all obviously will depend on the value of the cargo, the FOB value of the cargo. And the FOB value is basically when you get it onto the transport or onto the ship. So it is your value that it is, while it's still at origin, what is the value of the goods. And then you've got your total landed cost, right? So the VAT and the total landed cost is the same for all products. So we're going to go over it now, but as I'm going through the products, as we continue with the presentation, I'm not going to keep going over the same thing, right? So your total landed cost is the ex-works plus origin charges plus insurance plus freight. That will be origin and international freight. So whether it's air freight or going by a land, rail, truck, or by ship. So if you're not exporting to South Africa and you're exporting to some other country, then you may have sea freight involved as well, and then your duties and your taxes. So this is the cost of actually getting it to the destination country. And when we're looking at ex-works, ex-works is one of the Incoterms for those of you who are not familiar with Incoterms. Ex-works means that you have gotten the goods ready. So you've produced it, you've manufactured it, you've packaged it. And then you package it maybe in cartons or onto pallets, and it's ready to be loaded onto a truck. When it is ready to be loaded, right up until that point, that is your ex-works cost. So that'll be your overheads, however much you're including in your, the cost of having your warehouse, the labor costs, all of these costs that goes into manufacturing these goods, and all of the costs that go into packaging the goods, right? So these are costs, even if you are operating domestically, these are costs that you would consider when selling your goods, right? So you will look at your overhead costs and put a certain percentage towards a specific product, depending on how long it takes to manufacture or produce, cost of getting the raw materials for manufacturing, looking at the cost of your machinery, your electricity, all of that to actually make those goods. You have to take it into consideration when looking at your costs, especially to make sure that when you're pricing your item, you are profitable in the long run. And then you'll have your origin charges. So these are when you're looking at dealing with the transporter and when you're booking with the transporter. So someone asked earlier, what do we mean by booking? We mean actually booking with the transporter, the shipping company, the logistics company, and booking for space with them, right? So your origin charges will include those, your documentation that you need to get from them. And then you've got your insurance, how much of insurance is being paid to get the goods to South Africa. Then you've got your freight. This is your actual transport. So if you've got air freight to South Africa, that will go under your freight, okay? Or if it's going via rail or truck. Then you've got your duties and taxes, and that will be here, your VAT, or any other cost or duties, or if it's excise duties, you'll have to look at that as well. Now for ground nuts, which is the first product, we do need an import permit here in South Africa. So if I'm importing ground nuts, I need to contact the Department of Agriculture and talk to Plant Health. There is a specific form that I need to complete, as I've said earlier, with the details of who I'm buying from. So if I'm buying from you in Zambia, I need to provide them with your details, your company details, and I need to provide them with the details of how much of groundnuts I'm importing from you. And then only once I've got my import permit can I actually start importing. So if I ask you for a quote, then I must already have an idea that I need an import permit. And once you provide me with the quote and I'm happy with it, that's when I contact the Department of Agriculture and get the import permit. And from there, I will start going further with you and, looking at establishing the contract and making payment and all of the other issues that we need to look at. But the first thing I need to do from my side as the importer is to make sure I've got that import permit, right? And you as the exporter, you need to make sure that if you need to get a phytosanitary certificate from the Department of Agriculture on your side, you need to be ready to do that as well and know the process. So part of your export processes is getting, export registered. It's about registering with the different authorities. So if you need to get phytosanitary certificates, you need to register with the Department of Agriculture and make sure you know what the process is to actually get that phytosanitary certificate. So when you have that order in front of you, you're not actually running around looking for information. You know what is expected, you know how long it will take to get a phytosanitary certificate, and you can tell me as a buyer, you can say to me, you can say, Mary, it will take me a week to get a phytosanitary certificate. And this is important because you need to know how long it takes to do anything with regards to your product when you're exporting it, because that will go back to your timeline. So if I say, okay, I want to order today and I want to, let's just say I'm paying a deposit, and I'll pay 50% deposit, you must be able to say, okay, if you place your order today, you can get the goods in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or however long it will take, right? But you need to give me realistic timing. If you say to me, okay, it's going to be 2 weeks, it has to be 2 weeks. It can't be longer than that because then I won't want to order from you again. And that's part of the reason why on your assignment, we are looking at the timelines. So when you are quoting somebody, you have an idea of how long it'll take for it to get to South Africa. So that when you're dealing with your timelines, you're also talking to the transporter to see how long it takes. You're looking at, and they can tell you how long it will take with customs, and all the different processes along the way. So you need to have those relationships with the transporters and logistics companies that you're dealing with. They must be professional enough to tell you where there'll be delays and how you can reduce those delays. And once the goods come into South Africa, so if I've ordered groundnuts from you and it comes into South Africa, an inspection may be required. So I may need to take it for inspection, or the Department of Agriculture may stop it at the border and inspect it, right? So that's a process just for one of the products, right? So you need to make sure that when you are exporting, you have enough funds to pay your VAT, because in most cases, as an exporter, you will be doing your export clearance yourself or using a logistics company, but whatever it is, you're still paying for the duties or paying for the VAT. So always be aware of how much you need to make payment of and at what point, okay? Because customs won't release your goods. They won't approve your documents until payments are made. Then moving on to macadamia nuts. Again, VAT, same type of calculation, total landed cost, you're looking at the same kind of cost. Yes, an import permit is required here in South Africa. Cashew nuts, we may not need an import permit, but whenever you're dealing with your importer and your buyer, please always check if they need an import permit and remind them, because they may not be aware, especially if they're new importers as well. And sometimes we can say, oh, but we don't need to let them know. They should know. But if you are a new exporter, you realize that you don't know everything, and neither does your importer. And part of that relationship building is, reminding each other, has this been done? So they may ask you if you've done your phytosanitary certificate, you can ask them, is your import permit ready? And do it in advance so you don't have problems later on. Because if you want a long-term relationship with the buyer or with any of your customers, you will always be sharing information. And that is part of doing business with someone. You will share information, you will share advice, because you want things to go easily for them. So they come back to you as a seller and say to you, please, I want to order another, 2 tons of groundnuts or whatever it is. Soya beans and soya products, an import permit may be required. And also remember, certain products, you need to look at the quality, protein, how much of protein it has, and how you can get those sort of things assessed on your side to provide that information to the buyer. Okay. Honey, when we are importing honey in South Africa, an import permit is required by the Department of Agriculture, and an inspection is required. Also, on the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit, we do have a fact sheet on honey. We are very, very specific on honey in South Africa. Honey has to be irradiated, and even the labeling of the honey has to be correct. So there's specific types of labeling. It has to say which country it's coming from. It has to be a specific size of the font. So I know that's a bit tedious to worry about, but these are things that you do need to worry about, and that is why we've included it as a fact sheet. So make sure if you are planning on exporting honey, that you know what is required for honey in South Africa. So it'll make it easier on your side in the long run. Sugar beans, an import permit is required when we import here in South Africa, and an inspection may be required. And we do have a fact sheet on beans as well. So depending on the type of beans, depending whether it's dried or canned, there's different qualities you need to look at. And obviously the higher quality, you're getting a better price, okay? And you can market it to different types of retailers here in South Africa, looking at what they sell and the qualities that they require. So also, if you are involved in any type of beans, whether it's specialized beans, broad beans, sugar beans, that you are aware that these are the requirements, these are the different qualities, and look at your pricing accordingly and according to the quality that you're offering. Fish, an import permit is required here in South Africa, and that we normally would have to contact the Department of Trade and Industry. Meat and meat products, an import permit is required. We contact Animal Health, which is also part of the Department of Agriculture. And similar to the other agricultural products, we have to fill in a form and submit it to be processed by Animal Health. Also, please remember our permits take up to 30 days and sometimes even longer. And just remember, all meat products are usually inspected when they come into South Africa. So please bear that in mind. And when you're looking at meat products, there's different abattoirs in different countries that our Department of Health has already approved. So whenever we are importing here in South Africa, we need to be so careful because our Department of Agriculture is extremely strict. So if we have meat products coming in, we already need to know that it will be stopped and it will be inspected, and we need to make sure that we have the money to actually deal with all of that. So please bear that in mind if you are a meat exporter.
you will need to get your animal health certificate from your side when exporting as well. Moving on to textiles and apparel. So we don't need any sort of import permit for textiles and apparel, but a tariff rate quota may apply. So depending on the product itself, so if you've got women's dresses made of cotton, it might have a maximum amount that we can import from Zambia. So maybe we can import 10,000 tons. So whenever we're looking at tariff rate quotas, we need to understand that there is a maximum that you can export to a certain country. Now, the reason that you find that we have tariff rate quotas is so that we as South Africans, we protect our own textile market and we're not importing all the textiles, right? So as much as you want to export to South Africa, and it's easier for us to just import instead of manufacturing, and just as you want to increase your export market, we also need to look at that. So that is why you will always find tariff rate quotas on certain products. And these are the industries where jobs are created. So if you are growing your textile industry, it means you are growing the number of jobs, especially if you're growing it to export. There's obviously, thousands of jobs can be created in this way. So we may actually limit the imports because at the same time, we want to grow our textile industry to create jobs on our side. With regard to salt, we do need an import permit and an inspection is required. Olive oil, an import permit is required. And we obviously would need to speak to the Department of Agriculture for that import permit, and an inspection is required. When you're looking at things like sauces, we don't need an import permit because when you're looking at sauces, these are processed items. So you would have cooked through, if you've got tomatoes in the sauce or if you've got chili in the sauce, these would have already been most likely cooked through, right? So if it's heat treated, then you most likely won't need an import permit. But also make sure that your buyer knows that they need to check with the Department of Agriculture because it depends on how it has been manufactured as well. And an inspection is required. Dates, we don't need import permits, but an inspection may be required. Raisins, an inspection is required. Remember, raisins are dried fruits or under that, so it's processed. So unlike normal, grapes, you may not need an import permit, and an inspection would be required. Table grapes and inspection is required. Okay, so our here, which should actually be under notes, is 8% of FOB value. That's your customs duties. And I know here it's origin Namibia, but the reason why I've added this on is that it did come up when I was looking for the information. And it's also to remind you that yes, we do have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement in place, and a lot of countries have signed and agreed to it. But it doesn't mean that you will be fully exempt from customs duties like you are with the SADC agreement. So when you are using or when you're exporting, please make sure that your certificate of origin is under the SADC agreement and that you are not using a different trade agreement like the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, because a lot of the goods are still being discussed. A lot of the duties are still being discussed and what we can actually expect. So a lot of it, you will incur customs duties. It will be at a reduced rate compared to other countries. But just remember, with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, you may not necessarily be fully exempt from customs duties, right? So table grapes, yes, an inspection is required. For tea, an import permit may be required. Bananas, an import permit is required. Specialized beans, again, an import permit is required, and an inspection may be required. So remember, again, we've got the fact sheet on beans, so please go through it if you are exporting beans. Coffee, an import permit is required. An inspection is also required. And we also have an import prohibition, which means you cannot export coffee beans that are colored, polished, steamed, coated, or that have any kind of substances added. So please make sure you are aware of that if you are a coffee exporter. Sesame seeds, you may not need an import permit, but an inspection is required. Pistachios, an import permit is required, and an inspection may be required. Bottled water, an import permit is required. So this information is available on the toolkit itself. So now you know, okay, if you have a specific product, you know, okay, this is where you need to find the information. So if it's moringa, an import permit is required, may be required. And depending on the country, a site certificate may be required. So CITE is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. So if we have certain species of flora that are endangered, you may need a certificate from sites locally in your country to say it is okay to export. Okay. And an inspection is required for moringa. Okay, so just be aware that when you're exporting even cosmetics with moringa in it, you may need to have the site certificate. But you will need to go onto the site's website to just check if it is on the list. Medicinal plants also, import permit may be required depending on what the plant is, and you may need a site certificate as well. Inspections may be required for medicinal plants. And handicrafts and accessories, we don't need an import license, and there may not be any inspections. But please remember, if you are using leather or any animal skins, you might need to check that your importer gets an import permit from Animal Health or from the Department of Agriculture, because in some cases you will need an import permit, especially with leather goods, right? And then we've got cosmetics. Here, a site certificate may be required, and that goes back to the ingredients of the cosmetics itself. So if it's got moringa, if it's got any other, fauna or flora that is maybe endangered, you might need a site certificate. And with cosmetics, you have excise duties that may be applicable, right? So depending on the type of cosmetics, you may actually need to pay excise duties. So if it's sunscreen, yes, you will have to pay excise duties. PPE, because they also may fall under textiles, a tariff rate quota may apply, right? So these are all the different products that we looked at to find what are the requirements here in South Africa. So if you are exporting any of it, then you know, okay, you need to make sure that in certain cases you may need a phytosanitary certificate to be able to export it to South Africa. So the whole point of this toolkit is to make you aware that there are additional documentation that you may need when exporting. And as new exporters, you may not always be aware of it. You know, a lot of exporters learn by trial and error. And let me tell you, trial and error costs a lot of money. So just to be aware of that and to make sure that you have all your documentation in order before you start exporting, as much as possible, try and get whatever you can. Because even if you've got everything, you may still have problems. So to avoid any additional problems, make sure you've got the right documentation, you've checked with the buyer that they've got the import permit, and everything should go smoothly from there. But with international trade, there's bound to be problems. So the best thing you can do is control as much as you can, and you'll have to react at some point to whatever else you cannot control. Okay, so we are moving on to selecting payment terms and Incoterms. So as we've said earlier, we've got 4 payment methods. The first one is cash in advance. So this is obviously the most secure form of obtaining payment, but it is used infrequently. So it's not used very often. Under these terms, the buyer prepays the entire shipment or a part of it. So here we've got the buyer who pays for everything, and they may or may not get their goods. So there's a lot of risk for the buyer in this case. Even if they pay a deposit, still, there's no guarantee that you are a seller, are a legitimate seller. So a lot of buyers may not want to do it, but if you've done business of importing, you will know that a lot of countries will insist that you pay cash in advance, okay? So there's nothing wrong with insisting, especially if you're a legitimate business, because you need to make sure that your funds are okay, your business is sustainable, and you have enough finances to manufacture the order or process the order. But at the end of the day, it is up to you and the buyer on how you'll go about deciding on what payment method to use. The letters of credit. A letter of credit is the written undertaking of a bank to pay the beneficiary a stated amount of money if the beneficiary produces documents drawn up strictly in accordance with the terms of the letter of credit. Okay. So here you are getting the bank involved, right? Now, it sounds very complicated and it is a bit of a long process. But what happens is you give a client or a buyer a quote. So you may send a quote to me and I will say whether or not I'm happy with it, and then you'll send me a pro forma invoice. So what I will do is I will make sure that I go to the bank if we do decide on a letter of credit. Once I've got your profile and my invoice, I'll get your company details. I'll get your bank's details, right? Then I'll take it to my bank in South Africa. So if I'm banking with Standard Bank or with any other bank, I'll go to Standard Bank and say, okay, I'm buying goods from Zambia and I need to open a letter of credit. So my bank will get your details, they'll get your bank's details, and then Standard Bank here in South Africa will contact your bank to see whether you exist, firstly, whether you're their customer, and whether everything is in order to open a letter of credit. And your bank will contact you to confirm all of this. Okay, so once we've done that, and let's just say I'm buying goods to the amount of 20,000 from you, 20,000 US dollars, then the letter of credit will state, the goods that I'm buying from you, how it is packaged, the amount I'm paying for it, as well as the Incoterms, where delivery takes place and when delivery takes place. And then you'll find that you need to keep strictly according to the letter of credit. So if you are a seller and you do not make delivery on time, so if you told me you're going to deliver you're going to deliver to the logistics company by the 31st of March and you do not deliver until the 2nd of April, you will not get your payment from the bank, okay? Because if you have not gone according to the letter of credit, the bank will not pay you. Remember, when you look dealing with the bank, they deal basically on the documents, right? And everything on the documents must actually go according to what's on the letter of credit. So if you've delivered to the logistics company on the 2nd of April, and then they give you a receipt to say they've received the goods on the 2nd of April, and they've given you a transport document or transport waiver to say the goods were received on the 2nd of April, and you take that to the bank is going to say to you, no, we cannot pay you because you were supposed to deliver on the 31st of March. So please remember, when you're dealing with a letter of credit, whatever you've agreed to, you must be able to do. So if you've decided to send me 100 t-shirts, which is blue, and it's supposed to be V-neck, and let's just say your documents say it's 100 blue t-shirts, which are V-neck, but the goods are red t-shirts. Will the bank do anything about it? No. Because the bank is only looking at what is on the documents. They don't care whether you've actually shipped the goods. They just look at, are these documents according to the letter of credit? Now, I'm not saying if you've said deliver, you said you're going to deliver one type of good and you deliver something else. Please do not ever do that to your buyer. But remember that the letter of credit is based on documents. It is based on what you say on the documents, and that's how you get your payment, right? So make sure that everything is correct and according to what's required on the letter of credit. And also make sure the order that you've sent to the client is also based on that, right? And so now that we've opened this letter of credit, we've got all the information. As soon as we've signed on the letter of credit, my bank, if I've said I'm buying for the amount of $20,000 from you, they will take that $20,000 out of my account and they will keep it in a holding account, right? So when you do bring that letter of credit, or you bring the documents to your bank and everything's correct and everything's done properly, the bank will check the documents. If they're happy with it, they'll send it to my bank. If my bank is happy with it, they will release payment to your bank, who will then release payment to you. In the meantime, my bank will send me the documents so I can go to the logistics company and take delivery of the goods that you've sent me. Okay, so it is a bit of a long process and it might be a bit costly. So you will need to discuss that with your bank on how costly it is. But it is the safest method of getting your payment because you do have the banks involved. And as soon as we've signed that letter of credit, my bank will make sure that they take that money out of my account. So I don't go and do something. If I told them, okay, I'm buying for 20,000 from you, they will take it out of my account. So I didn't go and take that same 20,000 and go get another order from someone else. Okay, so they know that they have put their name on this and that they need to make that payment on my behalf. So that is where you have far less risk for both the buyer and the seller when it comes to letters of credit. Documentary credit is similar to a letter of credit. An exporter requiring less secure and cheaper payment method than an LC may negotiate payment on the basis of a bank collection. Okay. Oops, sorry. So you won't have the same process as the letter of credit. It will not be as strict. It will not be as low risk as a letter of credit. So the bank doesn't, put the name on this as much as they do for the letters of credit. Yes, they will make the payment. They will collect the documents, but they're not going to go through the documents as strictly as they would with a letter of credit. And remember, the letters of credit are governed by the UCB 600. So this is a global standard, and all the banks have to follow that when they're dealing with letters of credit. And that is not the case with the documented credit. Okay. An open account is that selling is said to take place on an open account basis when the shipping documents are sent directly by the exporter to the importer, who remits the agreed price. These remittances are usually carried out through the buyer's bank. So here you've gotten the goods ready, you've gotten the documents ready, and you put it all together. You've sent the documents to the importer, and they will make payment once they've received the documents. Now, this is very high risk for a seller, because here you've already spent money on producing the goods, on processing it, on packaging it, on your labor, and all the stuff that you need to do normally. And now you're sending the documents, which is basically, what they need to say that they own the goods, and you've sent the goods already, so which means you have no leverage. If they decide to take the goods and not pay you, then you will have a problem. So this is not an advisable payment method unless, it's an in-house account, or, sort of like those big companies like Coca-Cola, or these car companies like Toyota. They are sending from Toyota Japan to Toyota South Africa. Then yes, they may have an open account. Or unless you've had a very, very long trusted relationship with the buyer, right? So this is not done very, very often. Because at the end of the day, as an SME or as a business person, you need to make sure that you are getting your payments as early as possible, because your business has to be financially sustainable. You cannot be waiting 2 months after you've sent an order to get your payment. That is actually a very long time when it comes to finances in a business, especially a small business, and you could go out of business while waiting for that payment. So you have to be very careful in how you choose your payment methods. And, even if something is a little more costly, like the letter of credit, you get a lot more benefits in the long run from it than you would from dealing with all the other payment methods. So please always keep that in mind when deciding what payment method to go with the buyer. And also remember that you do not need to be forced into selecting a certain payment method just to make the buyer happy and just to get that deal. You need to look at your business overall and look at the worst case scenario, right? So, if I'm a buyer, obviously I want you to have an open account with me where I get the documents and I get the goods, and then I'll pay you whenever I feel like paying you. That would work for me perfectly, because while I'm waiting to pay you, that money is still earning interest in my bank account, right? So that would work for me, and I would say to you, that is what I want. But you must be able to say to me, no, I do not agree with this. This is the terms of payment. You will need to pay a 50% deposit, or you will need to pay the full amount in advance, or we could go with a letter of credit. So please be very clear about what you are expecting from the buyer, because ultimately you're selling the goods to make money. So you need to keep that in mind, because there will be buyers who want the goods and they will not want to pay. There's a lot of businesses out there who operate like that. So please just be careful and make sure you are making that right decision. Make sure you're choosing a payment method that works for your business and will keep you in business. Do not, if you have any inkling that something may not work out, please step away from certain deals or agreements, because in the long run, you'd rather be running a business that hasn't exported yet, but has the potential to export, or going the other way around, where you've had a bad deal and it's forced you to close down your business. So when it comes to risk, you have to choose your risk very, very carefully. when it is your business. And payment methods are the most important things when you're thinking about how much of risk you're willing to take on as a business. And as I've said, this is very different from domestic sales. When you are dealing domestically, you know who your buyer is. If they're in Zambia, it's easy for you to locate them. And you are following the same legal systems to get payment from them. You can claim from them. Sorry, there was some noise. So, like I said, domestic sales are a lot easier. But when it comes to international sales, you're dealing with people you don't know. So if I buy from you, you have no idea who I am. There's no way for you to even track me down because you're not in the same country as I am. You wouldn't be able to get my business address or my address very easily. So you need to keep that in mind, that you need to build relationships with your buyers because it's not as easy as your domestic payments and your domestic orders where you have sold and you get your payment immediately and you know who exactly you are dealing with. Okay, so that's your 4 payment methods: your cash in advance, your letters of credit, documentary credit, and open account, right? So always be aware of what the risks are when you're choosing your payment methods. So moving on to contract obligations. Now, we did mention that your contract is not a written out contract. But regardless of that, you as a seller, you have obligations. I as a buyer, I have obligations. And we need to make sure that we meet those obligations to make sure that everything goes smoothly, right? So as the seller, you must deliver the goods, okay? So that will be dependent on the Incoterm that we have chosen and where you need to deliver, whether you need to deliver in Zambia or whether you need to deliver to me in Durban or somewhere along the way. We can decide where we want the goods delivered. The seller must hand over any documents related to the goods. So things like the packing list, commercial invoice, transport documents, phytosanitary certificates, and anything else related to the goods, you need to hand over to me. And that will also be dependent on the payment method and so on. The seller must transfer the property in the goods. So here, this is with regard to your transport document or your bill of lading. Remember, your bill of lading normally acts as a receipt. It acts as a title deed. So please remember that if you hand over the bill of lading to me, then I will be the rightful owner. So whether or not I've paid for the goods, the shipping line won't care. Or the logistics company won't be bothered, because if I've got that bill of lading, it means I've already, to them, in their eyes, it means I've already paid for the goods, right? So the property in the goods is who owns the goods. And basically, whoever has that transport bill of lading owns the goods. So if you have decided that you'll send the documents to me prior to me making payment, then, and if I go to the logistics company and take release of the goods, then there's nothing that they can do to help you if you've already given me the transport documents. So make sure that when you are waiting for payment that you get it on time and you just don't go and hand over documents until you have that payment. Okay, so but your obligation is to deliver the goods, hand over the documents, and transfer the property in the goods. But remember, those documents are very, very important. They tell you who owns the goods, really. Then you've got conformity of goods. The goods must conform to the quantity, quality, and description. The goods must be fit for its purpose. The goods must possess the same quality as the sample or model. The goods must be contained or packaged to preserve and protect the goods. So if you are sending me honey, make sure it's not in glass bottles and packed on, anyhow, because it could break, and that is your responsibility as a seller. You need to make sure that it is packaged properly to preserve the goods. If you are sending me meat, make sure it's in a refrigerated container or refrigerated truck and at the correct temperature. So when I get the meat, or when I get the fish or the vegetables that you send me, that it is actually fine to be consumed. It's good for consumption, and I don't have to have any issues with it. So always make sure that the goods are preserved and protected. So when we say preserved, we also need to look at what temperatures do we need to have the goods in, and different goods need different temperatures. I mean, even if you're looking at things like apples, different types of apples need different temperatures. So one may need 0 degrees, the other may need 1.5 degrees, right? So all of that is important. And as a seller, as somebody who's dealing with the cargo itself, you need to understand how your goods need to be packaged and what's the best way to get it across the border or to the destination without it being damaged, and making sure that it is fit for its purpose when it does arrive. So your conformity of goods means whatever you've decided to sell me, it's in good order when it comes to me and I can use it, and I haven't wasted my time or, paying you the money, because I've got what I wanted and I can sell it to whoever my buyer is. Obligations of the buyer. So my obligations, if I'm buying from you, is to pay the price, which includes taking the steps and complying with formalities required under the contract. And what we mean by this is when we say taking the steps, so if we are going to select a letter of credit, my job is actually to go to the bank and make sure that I've started opening the letter of credit, right, with the bank, and we've got that process going. The other thing is, if I'm importing goods that need import permits, I must go and follow the process and make sure that I get the import permit, right? So that's my job as the buyer. The other is to take delivery of the goods. Because if I don't take delivery, so if you've decided that, yes, you're delivering to me in Durban on the 31st of March, and that's what we've agreed on, right? I cannot come to you on the 31st of March and tell you I cannot take delivery, because there's additional costs involved with that. So if you've got a transporter that's delivering on the 31st of March, what happens if I tell you I can't? And I tell you, okay, please only deliver on the 1st of April. So this means there's additional cost. There's additional transport cost, there's additional storage cost. So it's very important that we know who's going to be incurring those costs if I don't take delivery. So my job is to make sure that I do take delivery according to our agreement. And you can say to me, listen, if you don't take delivery of the goods on this date, as we agreed, you will incur the additional costs. Okay, so at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you're not being given the runaround. So you have your obligations. Your obligations is to deliver the goods, hand over any documents, and transfer the property in the goods, right, which is related to the bill of lading. And make sure that the goods conform to what we've agreed on. So the quantity, quality, and description, it must be fit for its purpose. It must possess the same quality as the sample or model. The goods must be contained or packaged to preserve and protect the goods, right? My obligations is to pay the price, do whatever else I need to with regard to paying the price and any other formalities, and I must take delivery of the goods. Okay, so remember, as a seller, you have your obligations, which you need to meet. And a lot of the documents that are needed, that comes from you, the seller. So the packing list, the commercial invoice, and sometimes even the transport documents that's needed from you, The phytosanitary is also needed from you. So the transport documents or the bill of lading, it will depend on who's booking the cargo, and that we go back to with the Incoterms, right? So always remember, these are your obligations. Your obligations is mainly with the documents and the goods itself, getting those ready. My obligations is to pay the price and take delivery of it. So what happens if something goes wrong? So if, let's just say, you don't deliver the goods on time, or you deliver the wrong quantity or the wrong quality, then we will have remedies, right? So these remedies will tell us what we can and cannot do. But also, please remember, this is international trade. We are not following the same legal system, so it's kind of hard to get to the point where we have remedies, where we can actually claim from each other, because it can be very, very costly. So that is why you do all your due diligence right before you do your shipment, before you even start manufacturing for the buyer. So you're sure that you don't have these problems down the line, right? So if you don't deliver to me, or if you are late with the delivery, I can claim damages. So if you deliver the wrong goods, I can request substitute goods if the goods do not conform to the contract. I may require you, the seller, to repair the product. The product may fix, or the buyer may fix an additional period of time for the seller to perform his obligations. So that's if you come to me and you said, Mary, I cannot deliver this on the 31st of March. I'm having a problem with sourcing the raw materials. I can only deliver to you on the 14th of April. So I may agree to it, but remember, if we have a letter of credit, we need to update the letter of credit as well with this information. Or I could say I'm terminating the contract because I cannot, afford to buy this and have that delay, because my buyer won't be interested in it in 2 weeks' time. It will be too late for that. So let's just say my buyer wanted something for the Easter weekend, which is, from the 15th of April. So you cannot tell me you're going to deliver on the 14th, because then my buyer won't need it any longer. It'll be too late for me to make delivery to him or her, and it will just, cause added delays from my side. And if I don't even deliver on time, then they will terminate the contract with me. So always remember that your buyer will always have other buyers as well. So whenever you are getting the goods ready, always be mindful of that. So I can terminate the contract, and sometimes it's better to terminate the contract and maybe reorder, or get back to basics again at a later stage than you sending the goods late, and then we don't have a relationship in the long run. Your rights as a seller, you may also claim damages. You may require the buyer to make payment, take delivery, or perform his other obligations, or you may fix an additional period of time for the buyer to perform obligations, or you may terminate the contract. So if you've said you want payment in advance by the 31st of March, or you've said you want a 50% deposit by the 31st of March, you can either give me an extension by giving me additional time, or you could say you're terminating the contract, and that's up to you, because you do not want to, have to keep following up and following up. And my job, as I've said earlier, as the buyer, my job is to make sure I've got the payment ready, or I've taken the necessary steps to make the payment, right? So as far as possible, whenever there's issues coming up right at the beginning, sort them out then and there. Do not wait to have sent the goods. Don't wait to have sent the documents. If you haven't received your payment and you've asked for a deposit before you send the documents, do not send those documents until you've gotten that payment. Okay? Because if you've got manufactured goods, right, you can always find another buyer. Whether it's locally or in another country, you can always start looking for another buyer if one buyer doesn't make payment. Cut your losses and move on. So be very, very careful, because even making sure that you have these remedies and claiming damages, it's extremely costly. You'll have to figure out whose law is working, whose law we're going to use for this contract, and that should be right at the beginning. If something goes wrong, which law do we use? So I don't understand Zambian law. I don't even know what your laws are or what it could be. You don't know what the laws are in South Africa. So it makes it very, very complicated. So that is why I say sort out whatever problems you have right at the beginning. Okay, this will actually save you a lot of problems towards the end, and to make sure that things go smoothly in the long run. Okay, and you get your payments, which is the very, very important part. We're going to move on to Incoterms now. To the moderator, can we have a 5-minute break, please? Madam Sapani?
Yes, sure. That is good for the panel, for the participants to digest everything that's being taught. So I think that's okay. We can break now and then come
so
back
5 to 10
at
minutes.
11:31.
Oh, give me till 11:35, and yeah, we can listen. So it'll give the participants a few more minutes and myself. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sure. To the participants, if you have any questions, please use the chat box. You can type in your questions and they'll be responded to. Hello. Hello, Madam Mary, are you back?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we can continue with the presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, madam. So now we are moving on to Incoterm, which is International Commercial Terms. They provide internationally accepted definitions and rules of interpretation for commercial terms used in contracts for the sale of goods. This definition makes it sound very, very complicated, but if you look at it and you're the seller and I'm the buyer, and we have decided that yes, I will be purchasing goods from you. Then we have to decide who's responsible for arranging the transport, who pays for the transport. So coming from your warehouse to the border, from the border to the next border, and until it comes into South Africa, who's paying for all of this? Right? And who pays for the insurance during this time? And at what point, do you stop paying for certain things, and do I start paying for certain things? So there's a lot to discuss between the two of us on who's responsible for what, who spends however much of money to get the goods from Zambia to South Africa, to Durban specifically, and looking at who has to do the customs clearance, who has to make sure that the transport waiver is done, who loads the goods, who offloads the goods. So it is really a lot of back and forth between the two of us if we go through this step by step, and we are bound to miss something because especially when dealing with new buyers or new sellers, we may not know everything to consider when we are actually trading internationally. So that is where the Incoterms come into play, right? So Incoterms are acronyms for different arrangements that we can have between the two of us on who does what when we are buying or selling from each other. When you are selecting your Incoterm, you have to consider your experience within an international trade, the risk associated with the Incoterm, the cost and financial responsibility, and your experience handling transport operators and suppliers for international shipments. So if you are exporting to South Africa and you need transport rates, now you would normally go and get a few quotes from different companies. You'd look at what they offer, whether they can offer insurance and all of these things. So you'll actually have to look at, can you actually do that? And can you afford those costs to pay for it in advance or not? Because remember, we also have to think about what payment method we've agreed on. So you may not recoup whatever you've paid in advance very quickly back from me. So you really have to consider which Incoterm you're using. Also, the risk associated with the Incoterm. We do need cargo insurance. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with your shipment. A truck can have an accident. There could be delays. The goods could get damaged if there's a strike. These things happen, and it is a reality. Even if it's on a ship, there's ships that sink. There's containers that fall overboard the ship. So who actually has that risk? Is it you or is it me? Right? Once it gets on board that ship, who's responsible for it? So that's where Incoterms come in to say who's responsible and who pays for what, and who's responsible for contacting the transporter when things go wrong, and so on. So that's where Incoterms make life a lot easier. Now, you don't have to fully understand Incoterms when we're done today, because let me tell you, it took me years to understand Incoterms. I mean, the first couple of times I had no clue what I was learning it for or why. But eventually, on my third try, I figured it out. And then I realized, okay, the focus is on the buyers and sellers and their relationship. And that's what we have to remember with Incoterms. So you don't have to know how many Incoterms there are. You don't have to know the background of Incoterms, where it started and all of that. You just need to know that if you choose a specific Incoterm, these are your responsibilities. So if you choose X Works or if you choose FOB or FCA, you must know your responsibilities as a seller, but you do not need to know it offhand because we have provided a tool on the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit, and that is from page 31 onwards, where if you open it up, you'll see all the Incoterms for 2010 and 2020 listed, right? So if you go onto X Works, you'll see, okay, this is what the seller is responsible for, and this is what the buyer is responsible for. And we'll go into detail in it in just now. But the main thing to remember is that you have a tool, so use it. You don't have to fully remember anything really, but you need to understand how to use the Incoterms and when it's important and what you need to consider when using that Incoterm. Because things do go wrong in shipments, and you need to be able to know what risks you have, what costs you need to pay for, and so on. We've looked at the easiest way to get people to understand the Incoterms and the easiest way for you to actually just read and say, okay, if I choose this, this is my responsibility. Okay, we've covered Incoterms 2010. Now, Incoterms are updated every 10 years, and we've covered Incoterms 2020. And we show you how to use it. And remember that there are changes from 2010 to 2020. It doesn't matter what the changes are. That's, going back to being more academic about it. You just need to know that if I'm using Incoterm FOB 2020, this is what it means. If I'm using Incoterms 2010, this is what it means, okay? So that is why we've got both, because Incoterms 2010 is still being used a lot. And people have only started using Incoterms 2020. So we've included that so you know in advance, you know what Incoterms 2020 would, if somebody says, okay, I want to use Incoterms 2020 and delivered at place, then you'll know what needs to be done from your side. Okay, so this is Incoterms 2020, right? Remember, this is not on the toolkit itself, but this is just to help you understand the Incoterms a lot easier. So you've got 11 Incoterms. You've got rules for any mode of transport. So these are rules that's for sea freight, it's rules for rail, it's rules for air freight and for trucking, right? So you can use any of these rules for any mode of transport. Then you've got 4 rules that's for only sea transport and inland waterways. So you can only use it when something goes onto a ship, because even if you go through the Incoterm, it'll tell you free alongside ship, free on board, which is on board the ship, cost and freight, where freight is basically your sea freight, cost insurance and freight, right? So this is all about the sea and getting on board a vessel or a barge or whatever, mode of transport it is at sea. And here you've got your any mode transport Incoterms. So it could be truck or rail coming from Zambia to South Africa, or air freight, or we wouldn't have to worry about sea freight, but these are the options for any mode of transport. So your first Incoterm is X Works. X Works is where you get the goods ready, and it's ready at your premises. And if I'm the buyer, I send my logistics company or transport company to come and pick up the goods. So your risks and costs end at your premises. And from that point onwards, the goods become my problem, and I'm the one who has to make sure that it's transported, the insurance is paid for, I'm dealing with the transporters and so on. But please remember, no matter what Incoterm we're using, you as a seller, you need to make sure that all the documents are available. So the phytosanitary certificate, the packing list, the commercial invoice. So the main documents are provided by you. Under X Works, I'll be responsible for talking to the transporters. So I'll be the one getting the transport document, right? Then you've got free carrier. This is where you deliver to a carrier, either at your premises or at a warehouse in Zambia. So this is origin. So this Incoterm is basically saying, okay, you're going to drop off at a warehouse. If I use a specific logistics company, I'll say, please drop it off at this address at the warehouse in Zambia. Once you have, and on that specific date, the risk passes to me. So all the costs, whatever's in blue, is for you. So getting it there, any insurance, any speaking to any transporters, whatever it is, that's you. Once it gets there, I must be responsible for offloading it and getting it to Durban here in South Africa, right? So that's pretty straightforward. So these two are quite straightforward. Then you've got carriage paid to. So here you are delivering it to destination. So if I'm in Durban, that's where you're delivering it to. Once it gets onto the truck or the first carrier, the risk is mine. So I need to make sure I'm paying for insurance. Okay. So if you will see that Incoterms are not always very straightforward, not as straightforward as XWorks and FCA. So here we must remember that you pay for the cost and I pay for insurance once it gets to the first carrier. Carriage and insurance paid too. Here the costs are borne by you, so you need to pay until it gets to Durban. Once it gets onto the first carrier, the risk is mine. But the difference here is you are paying for those. So if you see that in blue, you are paying for the insurance. But you're not paying for the insurance for your own risk, you're paying it for my risk, right? So if you are new to exporting, I wouldn't advise you to use this because it does get a bit complicated. Then you've got delivered at place, right? So here, you deliver to me, you pay for the cost, and the risk is yours until it comes to some place in Durban or even Richards Bay or whatever I've asked you to deliver at place at the destination country. So somewhere in South Africa. The next one is delivered at place unloaded. So we will have a specific place in South Africa that you'll deliver to, and you'll make sure that the goods are unloaded and the risk and cost are for you. Delivered duty paid. Here, it's the only one where you'll also be doing import clearance. So, and you'll be paying for the duty on my side, right? So this opens up your risk a lot more because you've got the cost and the risk, and then you've got the additional cost of paying duties. I wouldn't advise any new exporter to use DDP because you're putting a lot on your shoulders and you need to make sure you have the money to do that. Then we've got your rules for sea and inland waterway. So free alongside ship. So if you are exporting via ship, and obviously, you know, Zambia is a landlocked country, but you may have specific ports that you use. So once it gets to the port, that's when your risk and cost pass. Once it's in the port, ready to be loaded onto the ship, right? Then free on board is when it is loaded on board the ship. Okay, then that's where risk passes. So depending on which ports you would use, it will be dependent on that, and then you will have to have that on your Incoterm. Cost and freight. Here, you pay the cost to get it to destination, but the insurance, once it's on board the vessel, is for me. Okay, so your risk ends there, but your costs don't. It ends in Durban. Then you've got cost, insurance, freight, which is also similar to CIP. Here, the cost you pay till Durban. The risk is yours up until it gets onto the vessel. Afterwards, it's my risk, but you'll buy that insurance on my behalf. Okay, so there's a lot to remember, but you don't actually have to remember it all. If you go onto the cross-border trade toolkit, you will find that if you look at the Incoterms there, you will see that you've got your 2020 Incoterms on the first column. Then it will give you the acronym for the Incoterm, and then the full name of the Incoterm. And then we've got which mode of transport, right? So you've got any mode of transport, and then you've got C. Then you've got how you actually write it on the document. So you'll go X works, and then you'll put in your address of your warehouse and Incoterms 2020, which means Incoterms 2020 rules apply for this, okay? Which may be slightly different from Incoterms 2010, depending on which Incoterm you choose, okay? Then you'll have to have your delivery place, which is your premises, the seller's premises, the named place, agreed time, not loaded. So that means I'm responsible for making sure it's loaded onto the truck. So the seller is responsible for all costs up until it is at the buyer's disposal at seller's premises. The seller must pay the cost of those checking operations, such as checking quality, measuring, weighing, counting, that are necessary for the purpose of delivering the goods and may include packaging for transportation. The buyer is responsible for all costs, including insurance, from loading onto truck or transport, and all other transport costs and import clearance and duties. And on the next part, it tells you who's responsible for documents and what documents. So the seller, you will need to provide licenses for export, your certificate of origin, your phytosanitary, your commercial invoice, and packing list. Remember, these documents, no matter what Incoterm you're using, you are responsible for providing as the seller. So always make sure that you remember this, and also remember that you need somebody who's very detail orientated to complete these documents. If you go through the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit, you'll find examples of commercial invoices and packing lists and pro forma invoices and what's required on this. So some of this information can be a bit confusing. So if you have HS codes or whatever it is, you need the correct details on these. So whoever's completing these documents need to make sure that all the correct details, you cannot have mistakes on the number of packages. That will cause problems later on. So always remember the documents need to be done properly, and it has to be checked before it's sent to the buyer or whoever else. So customs and stuff do not have documents with mistakes on it going to customs. They'll put a stop to your cargo. Risk passes at place of delivery at the agreed time. Buyer will require insurance. So your last column is about where risk passes and who's responsible for what. Okay. The risk of loading at seller's premise may need to be discussed if seller is involved in loading. Okay. So as you go through each of these Incoterms, you'll find that you will know exactly what you need to do. So if you choose free carrier, you have to deliver to the carrier or person named by the buyer, nominated by the buyer at the agreed point within the agreed period and loaded onto transport. The seller is responsible for all costs up until delivery. The seller must pay the cost of those checking operations and packaging that are necessary for the purpose of delivering. Where applicable, seller will be responsible for the export clearance. Seller needs to provide licenses for export, certificate of origin, commercial invoice, packing list, export customs clearance where required, and the risk passes at place of delivery at the agreed time. Remember, your place of delivery is the carrier or person nominated by me, the buyer. Buyer will require insurance from this point. So if your buyer says, okay, they want DPU, which is delivered at place unloaded. So you will go onto this and you'll say, okay, this is what I need to do. I need to deliver at, so the seller delivers the goods and transfer risk to the buyer when the goods, once unloaded from arriving means of transport, are placed at the disposal of the buyer at named place of destination or at the agreed point within that place, if any such point is there, which means you need to get the goods to Durban. And then you look at it and then you wonder, will you be willing to pay for this? And then you can always go back to the buyer and say, no, you're not happy with DPU. You'd prefer FCA, right? Because you want to get rid of your risk in Zambia. So the seller is responsible under DPU. The seller is responsible for all costs up until delivery. The seller must pay the cost of those checking operations and packaging that are necessary for the purpose of delivering. The seller will be responsible for export clearance, but not import clearance. And the seller procures contract of carriage. Okay, so that contract of carriage is with the transporter or logistics company. The seller needs to provide licenses for export, so those certificate of origin, FITO, and all of that. The seller has no obligation to clear the goods for import, pay import duties, or carry any customs formalities. Risk passes at place of delivery, which is at destination. So you need to make sure you have insurance right up until Durban or whichever warehouse I've asked you to drop it off at, right? So that is how you use this tool. If it's FOB, you know, you deliver the goods on board the vessel and you are responsible for the cost up until then, you're responsible for the risk up until then, and for export clearance. So all you have to do is see, okay, this is what the buyer wants, and then you check what your responsibilities are as the seller, and then you decide whether or not you are in agreement with this, okay? So remember for 2020, you've got 11 Incoterms. You've got 7 for any mode of transport. And remember that you need to be able to choose it based on your responsibilities, on the risk, and what you are comfortable doing, right? So you don't really need to worry too much about the inland waterway and sea because this is focused on South Africa. But if you are doing exports that are to other countries, whether it's to the US under AGOA, then you will need to worry about these Incoterms for sea, right? And remember, you've got this tool on the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. It's on page 31, so go through it and look at which Incoterm you are happy with. So you can choose 2010 or 2020 Incoterms. Okay, so those are our Incoterms, and I'm sure you probably have questions on it. So please put them in the chat box and we'll have a look at them once we are done. Okay, so creating a timeline for the export order. So earlier I did mention that you need to have an idea of how long the goods will take to get to me, the buyer. So you need to consider a lot of things like how long it takes to handle your documents, how long it takes to clear the goods, arrange transport, even how long it'll take you to do a quote. Because remember, if you're doing a quote and the Incoterm says DD or DPU, delivered at place unloaded, you need to go and get quotes on the transportation. You need to know how much it costs to get goods to South Africa, how much it costs to do the export clearance, and what other costs you need to pay, your insurance, and so on. So it will take time for you to get that quote. And then getting the goods ready. You'll have to look at how long will it take for you to manufacture or process the goods to get it ready for me, whether it's 1 week, 2 weeks, or even a month. So you need to be very realistic about these timelines. So with the international supply chain model, you need to look at, so you've got different actors within it or different organizations. You've got the supplier, which is you, an intermediary, you've got authorities, you've got me, the customer. So it's basically buy, ship, and pay. And these are the main things we need to look at. You are responsible for preparing for exports, and you've got the export process, the transport that needs to be arranged, and I need to prepare for import and the import process itself. But this involves so many different things. So you've got your commercial procedures, you've got your transport procedures, and your regulatory procedures and financial procedures. And these all happen more or less around the same time. Okay, so the commercial procedures include establishing the contract, which is between you, the seller, and me, the buyer. Ordering goods, so I'll order from you, but you also need to make sure that you are ordering your raw materials. Advising on delivery, so you must be able to advise me when you can make delivery, and requesting payment, right? So this will be under your payment methods. Then you've got your transport procedures. This also happens around the same time, establishing the transport contract, whether it's you responsible for it or I'm responsible for it, collecting, transporting, and delivering the goods, providing a waybill or goods receipt and status reports. Then you've got your regulatory procedures. This is about obtaining import licenses, providing customs declaration, providing cargo declaration, applying for trade security procedures, clearing goods for import or export. Financial procedures, this is providing credit rating, providing insurance, providing credit, executing payment, and issuing statements. So if I want to purchase from you and I know I don't have the money available or the funds easily available, I may need to go to the bank and apply for credit from them before I even make an order from you. Now, these are 4 different aspects that we need to look at. But remember, it's all done more or less at the same time, because while you're busy establishing the contract, you are also establishing your transport contract. And you need to make sure that you've got your export and import licenses. Once you're busy providing the goods and getting the documents ready, you need to also be looking at your regulatory procedures, like your phytosanitary certificates. We need to be busy with our letters of credit. So there's a lot that goes on with a shipment, and you need to have a timeline for each one. So each timeline will add on to your overall timeline. Like, how long will it take for us to establish a contract? How long will it take you to send me a quote? How long will it take you to order your raw materials? When will it be delivered? And from there, how long will it take to manufacture the goods, right? How long does it take to have customs clearance done? Or transporting it from your warehouse to the border? So all of these time frames, you have to look at it. How long will it take for us to establish a letter of credit? So every little thing that you do may take a day or 2 or even a week or 2. So you have to add that onto your timeline. And why we're doing a timeline is to make sure that you know how long it'll take for the delivery to take place. And you can tell me, I'm the buyer, you can say to me, Mary, okay, this is how long it'll take me to manufacture, but these are the processes we follow in Zambia. So it may take me 2 weeks to manufacture, but it may take an additional 2 weeks for it to get to South Africa, because these are the processes, and this is how long it'll take to get cleared at each border that the goods pass through. Okay, so your export process is you're looking at your export quote and what to include in the quote. This is available on the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. Right at the beginning, we look at quotes. And then your clearing and forwarding agent, how to select your service provider, and look at companies that have experience exporting to South Africa, because you need to deal with people who know the processes, they must know the timelines, and they must be able to give you realistic information. So always be aware of who you're dealing with, and also they need to be reasonably priced. You don't want to be paying an arm and a leg and not getting the service that you deserve. Pro forma invoice, there's specific information that must be included. Processing the export order, this is where you are getting the order ready. So if I ask you for 100 t-shirts, you are busy in your factory getting it ready with your staff there, your machinists, your pattern makers, and so on, getting it ready, making sure the t-shirts are dyed according to the color I want, and so on. At the same time, you will be preparing the shipping documents and making arrangements with the clearing and forwarding agent. So that packing list and commercial invoice, that comes from you. If you need a phytosanitary certificate, at that time you need to be, while you're getting the order ready, you need to start following those processes. And make sure whatever documents you need, it's being done. So if you need to transport, you need to contact the transporter. This is the time to do it, to make sure to say to the transporter, okay, I need you to pick up this goods on the 31st of March. It's going to be ready tomorrow, and it will be packed so you can pick it up on Thursday. Okay, so these are different processes you need to follow and you need to be aware of it, and how long it takes. Documentation. So commercial invoice, packing list, transport waybill, exchange control forms, especially if you're using, that would be with your bank when you're making payments, or that you're going to be receiving payments, and so on. And permits, the import permit, which I will provide, and you need to ask me, Mary, do you have that import permit ready? And can we ship the goods? And then receiving payment. So it's either presenting the documents to me or to the bank. And then your after sales service. So part of that export process is your after sales service. So when I've actually received the goods, pick up the phone or send me an email to ask me if I'm happy with the goods and would I like to make another order with you. And that's part of establishing the long-term relationship with your buyers as well. Customer service is an integral part of any type of business. You need to be able to handle the complaints. You need to be able to handle a client who they are irate and angry. So please be aware that you need to have, if not a department, but a specific person that deals with the customer service issues. And the import process, which is from my side, I need to make sure that I'm registered as an importer. I've got my own clearing and forwarding agent. And when I'm dealing with the import clearance, I know what the customs duties are and the HS codes, correct HS codes to be used for a specific product, and the documentation. So the commercial invoice, packing list, transport waybill, exchange control forms, and permits. And if a shipment is up for inspection, I need to be ready with the funds to have them released, as well as the documents. So the documents are really, really important. They would need to be submitted to Customs or the Department of Agriculture, and it has to be correct. Otherwise, there's so many delays that we will face and extra costs. Because once Customs has stopped goods, they expect you to, or your logistics company, to take it to a customs bonded warehouse where they can inspect it. Now, they will decide which warehouse it goes to, and they will decide how much. You wouldn't be able to make agreements on how much you're paying for storage and all of that. So you need to be aware that there's certain things you don't have control over. So you need to have the funds available, or I would need to have funds available depending on the Incoterm. So if you've decided as a seller to go according to DDP, where you do the customs clearance in South Africa for me, then you'll be sitting with this problem. Okay? And import permits, that's something that I need to get sorted out from my side to make sure that once it comes in, we've got the right document and it will be released on time. And remember, the import permits, Department of Agriculture, take up to 30 days. They may take longer. It depends on how busy they are. So we both need to be aware of these timelines. And before you even send the goods, you have to make sure that I already have that import permit. Because if it is required and you send the goods, then I will be sitting with additional costs and so on. So going back to establishing your timeline, so it's important to know the export processes from your side. So you understand how long everything takes. So your international trade transaction encompasses all activities related to the establishment of commercial contracts. So your commercial procedures, the arrangement of inland and cross-border transportation of goods, so your transport procedures, the export and import formalities to meet regulatory requirements, your regulatory procedures, and the payment for purchased goods, your financial procedures. These activities involve collecting, presenting, communicating, and processing the data required for the movement of goods. They require cooperation between many actors, including exporters or traders, government agencies, and service providers from different countries. Okay, so remember, there's so many different people and organizations involved in your international trade. But one of the most important things to keep in mind is that you need to have a good relationship with everyone. And you may not have to like the Department of Agriculture. You may find them very irritating. You may not have like customs, because we don't want to pay customs duties or VAT or any other additional cost for our goods. But these are the rules that we need to operate within. So we must always try and have relationships with whomever we are dealing with. So if it is the Department of Agriculture, make sure you're aware of their processes in Zambia. And you need to ask them, how long does it take to get a phytosanitary certificate? And what is the process? What documents do I need to submit? And with customs as well, how long will it take to get the customs, my goods cleared? And what is the process? What documents do I need to submit? Find out as much information as possible in advance so you're not surprised later. Okay, and make sure that you understand how long it takes. And you don't come at the last minute with your document and expect things to be done immediately. The minute you get frustrated with them, that's when it takes long, right? We all know that. So please be ready with your documents and make sure your documents are correct. Because if they're incorrect, and let's just say you even have a simple spelling error, whether it's for your letter of credit for the bank or whether it's for your customs documents, it will really, really take a lot of time to sort these things out. So make sure whoever's doing your documentation does it properly and correctly and with the right spelling, and there are no errors on your documents. Okay, so this is all the stuff that we've covered. We've gone through quite a lot of it. So we've gone through the country and product specific processes, selecting your payment methods and Incoterms, creating a timeline for the export order, and we'll be going through the brief on the assignment shortly. So just remember, every single product may have different requirements here in South Africa, depending on what the product is, and you may need to speak to your buyer about getting the import permit, and you need to make sure that on your side, if you need a phytosanitary certificate, you need to be speaking to the Department of Agriculture or whoever you need to talk to, right? And your certificate of origin, that you need to speak to the Chamber of Commerce or the Department of Trade and Industry, depending on who actually handles that, right? So selecting your payment methods, remember you've got cash in advance, letters of credit, documentary credit, and open account. Make a decision based on what works for you as a business person. Always be aware of how much funds you have available and make sure that your business is sustainable. And then you've got your contract obligation. So you're the seller, you must deliver the goods, hand over any documents related to the goods, and transfer the property in the goods. The conformity of goods, they must conform to the quality, quantity, and description, must be fit for its purpose, must possess the same quality as a sample or model, must be contained or packaged to preserve and protect the goods. And I, as the buyer, I'm required to pay the price, and and I must take delivery of the goods. So you've got your contract remedies as well, which you can go through. And then Incoterms, you've got 11 Incoterms for 2020. And I think it's 13 for 2010, but they're all on the Regional Cross-Border Trade Toolkit. And last that we covered was your export order and creating your timeline. Okay. Do we have any questions before I do the brief on the assignment?
Thank you, Madam Mary. I'll just read some of the questions that are in the chat, and then later on the participants can raise their hands if they have any questions that will not be addressed. So the first question was on the requirement to export honey as an SME. This question was sent earlier in the meeting, so I'm not sure if this, if Madam Rose Monza still needs clarity on this, but Madam Mary, you could just go through the fact sheet on honey quickly if that question is pending. Then we also have another one from Madam Edna Kalala, and she's asking, are the border clearance procedures different from perishable to imperishable goods? In an event that the goods go bad due to delays at the border, who bears the loss in the instance of Ex Works? So these are the questions that are in the chat box. You could address them.
Okay, thank you. So firstly, let me just address the issue of the border clearance, and I'll come back to the honey and we'll go through the fact sheet. So border clearance under Ex Works, it is for the buyer, right? But also remember, when you're dealing with perishable goods, you need to consider how long it's being transported and in what manner. So you need to make sure that it's transported at the right temperature. So you need to advise the buyer, if it is the Ex Works, that this is the temperature it needs to be transported at. Because do not take a chance with transporting it in a normal truck when it needs to be temperature controlled, because yes, it will get damaged. And if you haven't advised the buyer, they can still come and claim from you as a seller if you haven't been open about how it needs to be transported. But the initial risk and the initial loss is borne by the buyer, because if it's Ex Works, it means they're coming and picking it up from your warehouse and they are transporting it. So from the time they pick it up from your warehouse, they will be responsible for it, and they will be responsible for the insurance and the risk from there, right? Going back to honey, let me just find the fact sheet. Sorry, I've just opened the document, the cross-border toolkit, and I will share the fact sheet on honey. So it's on page 22, the fact sheet on honey. So it basically says the Republic of South Africa has requirements for the control of the sale of honey or mixture bee products. This is administered under the Agricultural Product Standards Act of 1990. The regulations apply to grading, packaging, and marking of honey and mixtures of bee products intended for sale in the Republic of South Africa. South African regulatory requirements on honey and mixture bee products are designed to protect consumers while ensuring fair competition for the industry, including both local and imported products. So you've got different grades of honey. So your first grade is choice grade, which we normally find in the stores. If I walk into a store and I'm looking for honey, that's normally the grade that we would find there. The second grade is industrial grade, right? So the standards for honey shall be well ripened in the hive in order to contain the correct moisture content and enzyme activity and be free from particles foreign to its composition, such as mold, insects, or insect debris, sand, etc. Honey shall not have any foreign tastes or odors, have begun to ferment or effervesce, and have been treated in such a way that its natural enzymes are destroyed or made inactive. Requirements for containers. A container containing honey or mixtures of bee products shall be made from material that is suitable for this purpose, will protect the contents thereof from contamination, will not contaminate the contents thereof in any way, be so strong that it will not be damaged or deformed during normal storage, handling, and transporting practices, be intact, and be closed properly in a manner permitted by the nature thereof. Marking requirements subject to the provisions of these regulations. The required marking requirements shall appear in letters not less than 1 millimeter. And this is what I alluded to right at the beginning. You need to look at what font you need and what size. In height, so not less than 1 millimeter in height on any container containing honey or mixtures of bee products. Any container containing honey or mixtures of bee products shall be clearly and legibly marked with the following particulars. The name of the product in letters at least 4 millimeters high, provided that a true reflection of the kind of honey contained therein, such as creamed or chunk, the floral or plant source, such as sunflower, buckwheat, honeydew, or any other similar description, such as the geographical or topographical origin in letters of at least 4 millimeters high, may be used additionally. The name and business address of the producer or packer of seller of such a product, the country of origin of the contents, the grade of the contents in letters at least 2 millimeters high. When containing raw honey, the words raw or unprocessed in letters at least 2 millimeters high. When containing sugar cane honey, in any proportion as containing sugar cane honey. When containing mixtures of bee products with the proportions of bee products contained therein. The date of packing, lot identification in such a way that the producer, packer, or seller whose name and address appears in the container could identify or assist in identifying the premises where a product is finally combined, as well as a lot, provided that the data packing can be used for lot identification where applicable. The word irradiated or radiorized in letters of at least 3 millimeters high in the vicinity of the name of the product, when the contents consist totally or partially of honey that has been subjected to irradiation, provided that the indication of the radura symbol is optional, and the net mass in accordance with the Trade Metrology Act as applied by the South African Bureau of Standards. So here we've got honey container properly marked as per regulation, and this is how it would be: sunflower honey, the grade, the name and address of the business, the mass, whether it's irradiated, the data packing, and the lot identification, and the country of origin. Okay, so that's the requirements for honey. But I think the main thing is to make sure that you've got the proper containers and proper labeling in place, and it is according to what is required here. So I hope that is clear enough. Is that fine, or is there anything more you require on the honey?
It's clear.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's clear.
A pleasure. So go through it and go through the toolkit, because there is a lot of information that you can use from the toolkit. And I think when you're looking at honey, we do have a lot of imports, from all different countries. And it is a product that we all use. So there would be a market here in South Africa for honey itself, right? But just make sure you are following the rules, and it is, the buyer that you have has their import permit as well. Okay. Are there any other questions? Anybody wants to raise their hand or add a question to the chat?
There's a hand from Asha. I can see a hand from Asha.
Okay, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. I think you've been very clear. I just wanted to ask when it said medicated plants, what type of plants fall under this category?
Medicinal plants. It depends because a lot of these are usually contained in cosmetics or these oils that we use. Like the stuff that you'd use for things like eucalyptus and those kind of plants we're looking at, I think.
I see. So ginger, would ginger be one of the plants?
Ginger, it depends because that wouldn't be under normal sort of vegetable or spice, but that would need an import permit as well, I would assume.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, Asha, I don't know if that's a trailing hand or if that's a new question that you have.
No, that was from before. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any more questions before I move on to the brief on the assignment? Okay, so can I go ahead with the assignment question to our moderator?
Yes, please, you can go ahead with the assignment since we have no burning questions.
Thank you. Okay, so for this assignment, participants will prepare a presentation on the process of exporting a product of your choice from Zambia to South Africa. The presentation, if in PowerPoint format, should be no longer than 10 slides and cover the following requirements. You are required to select a payment method and Incoterm, calculate the customs duties, and where possible, the cost of export. For reference, you may use USD $20,000 or $20,000 as a base cost for the goods for calculation purposes. Create a basic timeline from quote to delivery and list the type of barriers faced when exporting a selected product and how these barriers can be alleviated. So there's quite a few questions to answer, but please, as you're working on it, use the toolkit and also really think about the barriers that you face. And, for you, it might be an everyday thing, but it's things that we need to discuss and look at how we can find solutions to these. So I hope the presentation I've given you is enough for you to prepare for this. So to Madam Supani, how much of time will they be given to work on this assignment, or are there any questions on it?
Okay, so we have until 13 hours, so that's 30 minutes to work on this assignment. But participants, you're free to ask questions before you go into groups to work on the assignment.
Okay, look, we've got till I think the presentations will be at 2 o'clock, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you'll have until 2 to finish them and then to present when we're back at 2, because we do have a sort of working lunch break in that time. But it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to do it as individuals or you want to do it as a group. So if you're working in the same company and you are sitting together right now, then I would say just do it as a group. But it is up to you. So you can decide now how you want to approach it.
Okay, so we'll open the floor to get some democracy. I can see individual companies from their introductions as well as from what's in the chat box. So we can quickly get, I'll just randomly call on participants to say what they would like. If they have any colleague in the meeting, so they can work in groups or they prefer to work alone. So I'll just quickly start with Madam Edna Kalala. What would you prefer?
Hello, good afternoon. I think I would prefer maybe you pair us so that we maximize the learning for those who are in similar business. I'm in food processing. Thank you.
Food processing. Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Kalala. I'll also quickly sample Madam Lydia. Would you prefer to work in groups according to the sector that you are in or individually? Madam Lydia, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Okay, I would also suggest you pair us. I'm also in food processing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jayesh Taka, what would you, just one last comment on how you'd like the assignment to be done? Mr. Taka, if you're speaking, you're on mute. Okay, we'll just get one more. Mr. Edify, how would you like the assignment to be done? Would you like it in groups or you prefer working individually?
Your question again?
How would you like to work on the assignment? So there's an assignment that's been given and the suggestion so far are to work in groups according to the sector. So you can just indicate how you'd like the assignment to be done. Would you like to work on it individually or in groups?
I think in groups will be better according to the sectors.
Okay, thank you so much for that suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay,
and when do we do the assignment?
So this assignment will start shortly up until lunch. So after lunch, which is at 14 hours, we'll get presentation from participants. So if you will be in a group, say with 2 or 3 people, one representative of that group would need to come out and give a presentation based on what has been discussed. So this will be a working lunch. And you can either go through phone calls or email or whatever it is that you prefer to make the discussion on, and then you would come back and give a presentation in this meeting. I am not sure if Teams allows for breakout rooms from the meeting itself. Probably our host can advise if the Teams will allow us to go in breakout rooms through this meeting.
From my side, I'm not sure. Wendy, do you have any idea?
Could you repeat that for me again?
Does Microsoft Teams allow us to go in breakout rooms? I know Zoom allows us to do that. Does
Yeah.
Microsoft...
I'm not so sure. Hey. Let me just check quickly.
Okay, as a
I'd
host,
be
I
very
think something
confused, and I
should come
don't
up.
see anything for breakout rooms. So yeah.
Okay, I also don't see anything. Wendy, as a host, you can just let us know. But if not, participants will have to either make calls or set up either a Zoom meeting or a separate Google Meets or however way they can meet to discuss these things, especially that they are not in the same office. Okay, so to break out the room, let me just quickly do a count of our actual manufacturers that are present.
But we need the assignment to be beamed. I'm not accessing it for now.
Yeah, I think you can actually break into rooms.
Okay.
Let me just copy and paste the way to do it
Okay.
on the chat section.
Okay, while Wendy is doing that, I noticed that most of the participants here are in the food processing sector. So other than grouping you into one particular sector, we'll probably break down the groups into 3 participants each or 2 participants per group. But we'll just hold on for Wendy to advise how the breakout rooms would be and how many we would break out into.
Okay, Jeanette, do you mind just telling me the names, because let me just share here so you can see. Can you see my screen? Because here there's a section to create the rooms, but I need to pick who goes where. So I'm not sure how to the best way to do that.
Okay, from my end, I don't have the options. The options are not coming up for the breakaway room. So I can be able to help you with the names together with Sopani, like who goes in what room.
Okay, let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay, Sopani.
Okay. So if we start with the name that's at the top, we automatically put that as group 1.
Okay.
So that's a representation from Yatu, that's Umoyo. Jeanette, advise if USAID would be put in a group as well?
No.
No, okay. And how many groups would we make? Would it be 3, 4 groups?
I think looking at the people on the call, we should be able to have 4 groups, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 4 groups should do.
Okay, so Wendy, you could assign the 2 into group 1.
The first 2.
The first 2.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Then we have from
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Okay. So then you skip Mr. Brian and Sofu and go to Mr. Edify Hakawandi.
Edna.
Edna, but preferably you could add Mr. Jayes Tucker because they're in edible oil processing. So this, yes, like that. So that will be the second group.
Okay.
So meaning we.
Lawrence.
Okay, Madam Lydia, we have, just wait for you to scroll. It's on. Okay, I'm intentionally skipping the ZAM and USA, probably would be assigned into the group after they've been made. Plus, I think Nancy Siame can be in the third group. And then the okay, so from the list that haven't been assigned, these are ZAM members, but we can assign one of the ZAM secretariat into one group. So just from the top, the ones that haven't been assigned, this is USAID representative. I think they will not be assigned, but yes, Jiholola can be assigned to group one. Say the next one is Mary. I don't think she'll be in any group.
Okay.
Mr. Obi Vanda.
They're sending him to group 2.
Yes. Miles Malambo can be assigned to group 3. Okay, and Richard and Madam Rose Mwanza can be assigned to group 4. So I think that is
all these 3 to group 4.
So this is me. Yes, you could assign me to group 4 or a group that has less participants.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So I think everyone has been assigned there. I'm assuming that once you click the open, then we all go into the different groups that we have been assigned in. So, but before we do that, we'll just make sure that everyone has a copy of the assignment. And once we go into these groups, participants, you will just pick who will represent the group after we come back from lunch to make the presentation. So I think you can open the groups and then we can each go into the groups.